Welcome to the Rue Papers. Hello, FR. Bet I know what you're thinking right now. It's all getting a bit weird, isn't it? Odd. Uncomfortable. If you were in this horror movie, you're thinking, you'd leave now. Well, I can't say I blame you for that. And part of me wants to. I mean, I might get sacked, but I could get another job. Probably. If I tone down the temper a bit. But it feels like I'm caught now. Like when you're watching a TV series and it all gets a bit strange and you want to stop, but you don't want to walk away halfway through. You want to see if it all works out. You want to see how it ends. FR doesn't feel right. I don't like that name for you. What else can I call you? I'll think of something. I told Rose I wanted to speak to her about all this and about the name Millington popping up. She said she'd get back to me, which is management speak for I can't be bothered right now. Okay, I have today's story. I have it. Sorry, sometimes it feels like a bit of a struggle to get started. Like, what awful thing am I going to read today? I mean, I spend the entire week reading very boring meetings minutes and accounts and letters about the running of Rue, and then I find one of these stories and it feels like part of me just wants to put it away, ignore it. But that's not who I am. Report by Frederick Cheveley, 11th of December 1911. Attempt to contact Daniel Millington via the means of a psychic, Mrs. Joan Hamilton. Bloody hell. That's the bloke that disappeared in the first story. And Cheveley again, he gets around, doesn't he? Still, we know he's not head of Rue by 1938. I wonder what happened to him. He doesn't seem the type to quit. I reached over to the laptop to search, but I don't know, this story really wants to be told. It took me ages to get started, and now I can't stop. Fine, I'll ignore Cheveley and get on with this. As with all psychics, Mrs. Hamilton's powers are disputed. Harry Price insists her powers are genuine, but I also have my doubts about Harry Price. Nevertheless, she has so far managed to pass all our tests. This will serve both as a genuine attempt to contact Daniel Millington and as a severe test of Mrs. Hamilton. No one knew Daniel Millington better than me, and I will know if what she says are his words to me are a lie. A personal note, not for distribution but for my own reference. I miss Millington greatly. He and I had many discussions about the work we do. Once he was gone, I found myself bereft. I fear my longing to talk to him again may make me over-eager to believe. I must guard against this. I must remain an emotionless automaton, for all our sakes. It is to Mrs. Hamilton's credit that she refused to either darken the room nor use any props such as a Ouija board or make us sit around a table. I despise these props, and know them often to be a cover for trickery. Instead, at her suggestion, we sat side by side in his office, the blinds open. Millington's office, I mean, of course. I had never packed it away. He may return. People have been known to. I had invited Millington's family to attend, but they have no interest, and have cut off all contact with Rue since his disappearance. They would have burned his papers if I had not taken them in time. I set up a phonograph to record the entire session, for the sake of future researchers. Mrs. Hamilton started in usual fashion, asking if there was anyone there. She spoke in her normal voice. The papers on the desk rustled, possibly the wind, and there were 2 loud raps. I have not discounted the possibility that these were made by Mrs. Hamilton. As we are all aware, some people have the ability to crack their joints to make these sounds. Let us not forget the Fox sisters. She called him by name repeatedly, and the above occurrences repeated. I admit the atmosphere was tense, but I cannot excuse myself for what I did next. Driven beyond endurance, I called out, "Millington, it's Cheveley. Answer me, Millington." The papers became still. The knocking stopped. Mrs. Hamilton grasped my hand, and I heard her say a soft, "Oh," and then, "That hurts." Then a wind, I can't tell from where, swept through the office, and all the papers were blown about. The knockings commenced again, this time from all over the room, the ceiling, the floor, and the air changed. I cannot describe it adequately. It became cold, but also heavy, as if I could not breathe. "Millington?" I asked. And then the voice came from Mrs. Hamilton's mouth. She had slumped sideways in her chair, unconscious, and her mouth was opened, but her lips did not shape the words. Perhaps it was ventriloquism. Perhaps. Mrs. Hamilton had quite a distinctive voice, soft and with certain peculiarities in pronunciation. This was not her voice. A torrent of words issued from her mouth. I record them exactly here, as taken from the phonograph recording. "Where am I now? How did I get here? So cold. Where am I now? I don't belong here. I was home. I was safe. And now what am I? What am I? How much time? Why? I don't deserve this. How much time? Somebody here promises Cheveley, Freddie. The blue lands. Not what I was promised. I trusted you. Help me. The voice was urgent and pleading. The sound of a man in despair. "Daniel," I called out to him, desperate to help my friend. Then I remembered my training. "Millington, prove this is you." "Freddie, help me, save me. So lost, so cold, terror, fear." I was badly shaken, I admit. My friend, if this was my friend, was afraid. And this was unendurable. "Daniel," I said. And then I heard his voice, so clearly as if he sat beside me. That afternoon, as we sat beneath the apple tree, the white blossom falling on us, and talked for hours, about more than Rue, about it all. And then another voice, harsher. "Is that proof enough, Cheveley?" And the hundreds of voices, she could not have faked them all, not talking in chorus, but over one another, screaming and shouting at the blue lands and the gateway and the path, and when will the door open, and they were promised. They had so much to share, they could be of use. They completed the ritual. Now it was our turn, and one voice, harsher, above all, with malicious glee. "We have him now, and we will not give him back until you do your bit." And then the voices all joined together and screamed one word over and over. "Ellington, Ellington, Ellington." What the fuck was that? Where's the torch? Hello? Bloody hell, what a stupid thing to say. I don't want anyone to answer. A word glitch. An echo. Something in the PA system. The computer having a moment. Anything rather than be what it sounded like. I'll finish the story. I'll finish. I need to know what happened. Ghosts can't hurt us. If it was a ghost, they're just shadows and memories. I attempted to question the voice further, but it had fallen silent. Mrs. Hamilton stared and asked if anything come through. I asked if she did not remember, and she said she never did. I showed her out and paid her, as befitted a professional who had done her job well. Note: the name of Ellington is not to be redacted from the record. I understand the rules of Rue insist it be destroyed to protect future researchers from delving too far, but it must be kept this time. It is Daniel's last word. Oh. I have tried to invite Mrs. Hamilton in several times to try to reproduce the session, but she does not answer my calls. The phonograph record has disappeared since I made the previous notes. So all that is left of my friend is what I have written here. I fear that this entire session has proved what I was most afraid of. He has not just disappeared. He is dead. I have lost my dearest friend forever. Addendum. In 1913, I was contacted by Mrs. Hamilton's sister. She demanded to know what we had done to her. I informed her that Mrs. Hamilton had left my presence well and healthy. We had not been able to contact her again and had left her alone, believing that to be her wish. Her sister told us that soon after the session, Mrs. Hamilton started to have fits. She would pass out and a stream of voices would issue from her mouth. The voices would talk about the Blue Lands and demand to be freed, and talked of the horrors of being trapped behind the door. Some of these voices were recorded onto wax cylinder and I was able to hear them. I will admit the voices horrify me. It did seem to be a mix of different voices. Please note this cylinder also disappeared. I was told that one night the voices kept coming over and over and would not stop, even though Mrs. Hamilton was awake and conscious of what was happening to her. She screamed until her voice cracked. As I have said, Mrs. Hamilton's own voice was quite distinctive and unique. The voices that spoke from her mouth, I have heard, were nothing like her own voice. She was admitted to an asylum that same night. Even when unconscious, the voices continued. She had to be gagged. The asylum called it a state of mania and refused any other explanation. However, after 3 days, she awoke and appeared to have become unusually strong. She broke her bonds and was seen running towards the doctor's office. An eyewitness reported that the last words she had spoken were first in a strange voice crying out, "I have found a pathway!" and then in her own voice, "I will not let you through." She drank acid, burning out her throat and silencing her forever. She died 2 days later in agony. Her sister blamed me. I blamed me too. But I had to know what happened to Millington. Bloody hell.
Hello, Beatrice.
Fuck! Sorry. I'll clean that up. I've got some tissues.
Beatrice, it's a 50-year-old library table. I guarantee you it's had worse things than coffee spilt on it. I'm sorry I made you jump.
It's my fault. The report I just read was, intense. When you sent me down here to do this, did you know these were all Rue papers? Did you know they were all ghost stories?
I knew they were all papers of some society. I didn't know what they did. I did some research after you told me. I can see why it must be unsettling. Would you rather stop?
No, I think I'd rather carry on. I've started now, and I hate to leave a job unfinished.
I know. That's why I knew you'd be perfect for this. You don't stop. It can be a bit annoying, but...
Really? Because it felt like a punishment, being sent down here into the basement, reading these old papers, and...
It's not a punishment. You are sensible, and you aren't nervous. And you stick to a job once started. And I knew you could be trusted on your own down here, doing the job. You're all right, aren't you? You're not bothered by the basement.
A few nightmares about zombies and ghouls, but that'll teach me to sleep on the job.
Good. Look, these papers are fragile and precious, and I know you can be trusted with them. And I see your laptop is on battery, and you have a portable lamp and torch. You're not using the electrics down here at all.
You told me not to. I've got an internet line, but...
That's fine. Just don't switch the lights on. You're liable to get a shock. Now, if that's all...
Ellington! You said you'd tell me. The name Ellington pops up a couple of times, and as this library is called Ellington...
Yes. It's named by the family that owned this house. They left it to be used as a library for unusual and antique books, as long as it was called Ellington.
So they had the Rue papers, but they seem to be some sort of rival to Rue, so how could that happen?
I've no idea. I don't really know the history.
Could we ask the family? The Ellington family?
I'm afraid the family has all died out. Beatrice, don't get too caught up in the stories. Just read them out, Finish on time and go home. Don't let it affect you. Don't get too obsessed. It's just a job. I have faith in you. Beatrice, I know you know that stories have power, and some stories, Bea, can even give power.
She's right. It's just a job. I do tend to get too obsessed about things. When I was a kid, I'd get fixated on things and get so excited I'd get dizzy and pass out. I've been feeling a little like that lately. I was always being sent somewhere quiet to calm down. Come to think of it, there was quite a thing in my family. Don't remember much about them, but I remember my mother and her sister could be a little intense and telling each other just to breathe. You don't need to know about that, Ep5. I must learn from Cheveley and be more professional. Anyway, back to the story. But nothing about Ellington from Rose, though. Nothing useful. I think I'll ask Robin. He has access to the weird books on the first floor, and he's always loved ghost stories. He'd be delighted to help me. Come to think, he'd be much better suited to all this than me. He wouldn't get creeped out by strange noises. He'd probably love it, not fall apart. No, I'm not a child. I can cope with all this. I think Rose is right. I think this is what I meant to do. Thank you for listening to the Rude Papers. Written and created by Emma Butler. The voice of Bea is Emma Butler, and the voice of Rose is Natalie Doig. Thank you for listening, and remember, some stories should not be told.